Ahoy there, everyone. My name is Carpo, for those who don't know, and for those who do, well, what's up? How do I start off this video? You know, I've been wanting to make this video I'm going to close this screen where I can see myself, because I think it'll be easier for me to just talk to the lens. I've been thinking about this lately. You know, sometimes I end up making sure I'm centered in the camera. So anyway, this is going to be kind of a long drawn out video. I wouldn't say drawn out, but rather it's going to cover a wide variety of topics. I've had a lot on my mind lately, the last couple days, just about being alive and being human in general. And so I thought I would share some of my findings. Anybody who's followed my channel for a while knows that I go through phases and stages where something interests me, and then I'm off to something else, and I'm very flighty when it comes to that, it appears, but I always return to the most important things, and that's always values, integrity, and good judgment, good moral character. But all of this is based on wisdom and education, and this is one of the most difficult things I have found to convey to people, is that it's not a pious attitude of, okay, I know better than you, or this is true because I'm wiser than you, which is how it appears when you're talking with somebody and you know more than them, an authority on a subject. I've tried to explain to people in the past that sometimes it's not that I know more about a subject, it's that I have a wider understanding of all the subjects involved than they do. And so I may not know as much about the specifics of, you know, this technological aspect of it, but I know a wider encompassing thing that makes more sense. It's kind of like overlooking the obvious, missing the forest for the trees kind of thing. And sometimes we really get so wrapped up in the details we miss the simplicity of what it means to be alive, or what it should mean to be alive. And what does that mean? So what does that mean to me? I guess, you know, I should start off by explaining myself. My belief is that life is a self-fulfilling destiny, that our existence here upon the earth is something that, when we talk about in terms of God, I don't even try to go down that road, because everyone defines God in their own way. A good way to start off would be to say, there was a link I posted yesterday to a Manly Hall video that I had watched, and it said that he was talking about religion in the middle of it, and he said that if religion doesn't bring you happiness, if your belief system doesn't make you happy, or if it forces you to try to get others to believe what you believe, then it's not a valid system of truth. And I really thought about this because I know this, it's so obvious to me, but the most difficult part to convey to people who believe, let's say extreme Christians, you tell that to them and they say, well, religion's not supposed to bring happiness, because they've read into the Bible or whatever scriptures they want to see that for some reason a person is a sinner from birth, so they're not supposed to be happy. Now, I'm not here to diss religion, I'm making an example, and I've avoided using Christianity. I know I have Christian subs, and I respect the person who believes in whatever they choose to believe, so long as they're not pressing it on others. But I've had it pressed in my face so many times by pious Christians that naturally I use that as an example. The people who have pressed Christianity on me the most have seemed like the unhappiest people. And often the justification I've heard from them is, well, we're not here to be happy, we're here to serve God, and when we die, then we go to heaven. This is the thinking that has separated, it's kind of the cop-out that a lot of folks have used as to why their religion doesn't bring them happiness. We ask ourselves, why doesn't life bring me happiness? Are we in a default mode of happiness? Are we supposed to be happy all the time? Now, a year ago, I remember making a video about the subject of happiness and how suffering is part of happiness. I've made several videos like that, but I remember saying that, you know, utopia is a state of ignorance, because thinking that we can ever live in a perpetual state of bliss is, you know, a preposterous notion. I mean, I remember saying that. But because we have to have the negatives to have the positives. But at that time, and I still believe that, but I realize that the negatives can be few and far between. That if we learn from the past, the mistakes that we've made, then and use them properly as tools, then we won't have that problem in the future. Once a problem has been conquered, it never returns. If it does, then it hasn't been conquered. It's still a problem. Problems are often dealt with by a mental outlook on things. To realize that something isn't as big as it seems, or it's not as big of a deal. Mental alchemy, as it is, but I've realized that you can live in a perpetual state of bliss. However, whatever things you need to achieve that may be just totally right there at your disposal. Just like the idea that you are God, and when people hear that, they say, "Oh, that is total blasphemy." These are devil words. People are going against, the Lord. The truth is that, these are the things that supposedly even Jesus said. That the kingdom of God is within you. That finding truth is within each one of us. And my point for saying that is that we have the power within each one of us to be happy, regardless of what happens in our external lives. Much of what happens in our lives is a result of our improper use of what we've learned. We're not using what we've learned. I think these are important points. I think most people would agree, too. And I have these notes that I wrote down here, and I really wanted to see. I haven't even got to the notes because I was afraid I'd forget this stuff, but it's just so ingrained in my head that I just can't, I'll never run out of stuff to talk about. Because the first thing I wrote here, it was about mistakes, actually. I said, we're not the same person who made mistakes in our past. We're a new person and have grown. If we had not grown, we would not regret the mistake of the past. And that was along the lines of what I was just saying, that if you realize and recognize that you've made a mistake in your past, something that you did wrong, maybe living a way that made you unhappy, being a way that made you unhappy, or doing something that made you unhappy, it's only a continuous mistake if you allow it to bother you as such. When you can set yourself aside and beside it and realize that when you did that, you were a different person with a different mental outlook on the world. Usually we were very young. Sometimes these are things that happened 20, 30, 50 years ago for people, and they're still obsessed over the mistake they made. It's gone. Get over it. The worst thing you can do is hang on to something that you did wrong. You use that to boost yourself up. No matter how many mistakes you make, if you use every one as a stepping stone to get better, you will stop making mistakes. This is just fact. It's such an obvious thing to me. But if we wallow in our pity and say, "Poor me," this is when everything falls apart. What good, true penance, the way I see it, is realizing the mistakes that we've made, our actual sins, which are really our bad ways of thinking, our negative ways of thinking. Once we've created this, cured ourselves of this sin and done our penance, we can be happy. We can live in light and happiness. I've been working on this myself for a long time, and I keep continually being amazed with the way the universe just serves me with a happy attitude if I ask for one. If I do my part, which means that you work properly, you play properly, you father properly, all the things have to fall into place, and when you're doing things right and wrong, but it all comes back to having the wisdom to know what's right and wrong. So back to what I said at the beginning, you have to have the wisdom, but you also have to have a wide enough wisdom of everything, an all-encompassing knowledge, a jack of all trades, so to speak. So you can say, okay, I can lean this way, but this side tells me something is not quite right with it. And we use our best sense. That is growth, because you can only make so many mistakes if you always use your honest, rational mind. So what good is penance if it's not sincere? I feel like I do penance all the time by looking at the things I've done wrong and trying to cure them. Meanwhile, somebody thinks that they can step into a box and talk to a priest and get some 5 Hail Marys and be cured of their sins. That to me is like a total lack of it's giving your power away. And this isn't just something that happens in religion. This happens to these charlatans, guys who sucker people in, like David Icke, who believes in the reptilian theory, who has taken these primal archetypal ideas, which I've been reading about for 2.5 decades now, I've been fascinated with all different types of ancient knowledge because I feel like there's something there. So I was all about the Egyptians, when the internet first came out, the first thing I was searching was all the ancient information, Mesopotamia, Egyptians, the Sumerians, and I wanted to understand these texts, and guys like Sitchin who had, written about Nibiru and all these different ideas. And after, 2 decades of looking through it, I realized how much of it is bunk. And now I've taken a totally different approach to it, yet I'm meeting people who are still in the stages of being suckered in by these guys, not even realizing that many of them have been disproven. And I bring this up to make a point that even though some of these guys are authors of books that have been proven to be wrong, they're still quoted by people who have not looked at the evidence to show that the books were wrong. This is akin to people quoting the Bible as being the literal interpretation of God, when it's not even in Hebrew. I mean, Hebrew is a phenomenal numerical language, and there very well may be very divine importance in some of the Bible's books, but not as it's translated into English. Taking that literal word causes many problems, as we know, and causes conflicts and battles, and people argue, and churches can't get along, and it all comes down to what I was saying earlier. Truth. True truth comes from within, and when you have truth. It's not something that you have to prove. It's not something you have to convince anyone of. And it's funny because I always wanted it. I kind of envied people who really believed in something strongly. Because I never developed a belief system, and I refused to let myself be sucked into believing something merely because others had. I found Buddhism very attractive, but Buddhism isn't a religion. It's a way of life. So I became a Buddhist, if you will. A person who's seeking enlightenment through practice, honoring suffering and whatnot, but I still laughed at the Buddhists who were obsessed with suffering because many of them lived in times when that's what they needed. And I started listening to guys like Manly Hall, who would, pretty much lay on the line that all religions were created equal in the areas to which they suited them best. Just like pork not being in the Quran, not being allowed to be eaten by Muslims, having to do with not the filthy animal of a swine, but it not being good for milk or anything else except for just meat. And you can find many historical contexts and reasons as to why these rules were written down. But times have changed. Some of these actual ideals, I should say, the most important things haven't changed. The core truths that no matter what men have argued the name of God or the name of truth, there have always been core principles that we cannot break from. One of those principles is truth and honesty. People who are dishonest in our society are quickly dismissed and pushed away. And although we get frustrated because we see people who are dishonest, who are in positions of power, or who are on television appearing to have, a lot of influence, and we think that everyone's an idiot for believing these guys, really there's a lot of people who don't believe these guys, a lot of people who see through it and realize, many of us, I have a very positive outlook of the way that of the people in my country and in my world, that people are much more aware than we like to give us credit for. We like to think that everybody else but us doesn't know shit, and that's just not the fact. We all have a little piece, and we're all a little bit ignorant, but really the whole idea is to grow. And growth means not stagnating in a belief system that leaves you behind, whether it be a political, ideological, or religious, any type of system. Maybe you're working in a job that you know is dangerous, maybe for the environment, or harmful to somebody else, or taking away from another. And I'm not sitting here being pious or saying people should do this or that. I just think that people know what they need to do. That's the whole point I'm trying to make. You know what you need to do. Nobody needs to point the finger at you and tell you, because you know what you need. But you got to make sure you have the wisdom to develop that and know the truth about it. People say that or that they feel like they're being tested. When I hear that, people say, "Oh, I just feel like I've been tested lately." Life's a test, and if you don't pass, you'll just keep being tested over and over and over. Everything about life shows, and it appears to be, whether we like it or not, it seems like we're being tested and teased by nature. That nature knows what we're thinking, or whether it be our subconscious or otherwise, whether it be internal or external, When we make mistakes, we know it in our hearts, and our hearts will not allow us to forget it. Is there anybody out there that can deny that when you do something wrong, besides a sociopath, is there anybody out there who would really say that they can get away with doing bad things to benefit themselves without feeling guilty about it later? And is the guilt worth the profit? I don't know. Let's see what else I got on this paper. I guess I only wrote a couple more things on this one. I lost one of the pieces of paper I haven't even really been using the notes here, but the one I wrote on the top was, if you disagree with one person's point of view, one thing that they don't believe, kind of like the old joke about whether you go to church on Sunday or Saturday, the whole thing is that when you disagree on one point with someone, it doesn't mean you discount them completely. Or if someone starts off with a bad conversation or doesn't quite know how to handle themselves, maybe you disagree with a family, loved one, or a friend, you got to get over it quickly. You got to move forward. Let the emotion pass. If you're angry or upset, just let it go. And remember that you cannot be angry at somebody because you disagree with one of their points. Even if that point questions everything, the whole foundation of everything that you believe, if you feel in your heart that someone's questioning something and it hurts you, then ask yourself if that's a foundation of belief. Because a true belief, you won't hold any resentment. You'll wonder why other people don't get it, if you know what I mean. What else? I wrote one more thing. We are given the most power but afraid to use it, so we abuse ourselves. That was a really important point. I believe that we have full control over our lives and over what we want to do and over what we can do. We have a lot more power than we want to believe that we have as individuals. But we give it away to others by telling ourselves that the world is run by these people or that people, that I can't do this because of A, I can't do A because of B, I'm being held down because I'm either black or green or whatever a person may have, whether it be racial, circumstantial, political, religious-wise. A person can step out of their own reality and realize that they're seeing themselves in the wrong light and take a full new control, completely turn their lives around by making a decision to change the way they think about themselves. And that's a bold statement, I know, on my part, but it's true. It's really true. I've seen people do this, and I've done it myself. I've always had a decent outlook on myself, but by knowing that everything I do is worthy, because I do it from the heart, I live happily all the time, and I wake up ready to face the day. I wake up like those guys. I used to wonder, how can they be so energized and happy? It's like, it's about living right. It doesn't mean that you have to be vegan. I ate meat for dinner last night and I feel fantastic. If I didn't eat meat, I'd feel fantastic. It's about how you live. It's about your state of mind. People try to pin it down to whether it's what religion you believe, what you eat, what you wear, how you present yourself, whether you talk or don't talk. The truth is circular was the last thing I wrote, just 3 words. The truth is circular. And what I meant by that was that this is something I've realized, is that no matter how deep you delve into things, it always comes back to the basics. And this is what I've realized, and that I've been confirmed by others, because I wouldn't be so strong-willed on this, I guess, speaking about some of these things, if it weren't for the fact that I've heard so many old men and wise old philosophers with some of these key points that they all agree with, and it's like you hear this in them. One of them is that life is about how you live, quality of life, not about how long you live. It's not about what you gain. None of it can be taken with you. The only thing that you can take to the grave with you is what you've done and your values and your morals, and you can't take those with you either. Maybe you can, but whether you believe in an afterlife or another life, or whether you're reincarnated, none of that really matters now. What matters now is how is your belief in anything serving you. And so I guess I'll leave on that point. If you're unhappy, then you need to question what you believe and why you're unhappy. You need to question the situation you're in, whether you put yourself in circumstances. Are you doing it purposefully to yourself? I'm a pretty easygoing guy. There's two different ways I cope with my problems. Either A, I make them, I walk away from them if they're problems that I shouldn't have to deal with, or B, I just make them into not problems. If something bothers me, I turn it into a test. I turn it into something positive. That is manifestation of reality. That is creating a whole new network in your brain of being able to cope with things in a new way and see things in a new light. I haven't had a poor me attitude in years, and it gets better every year. Once in a while, if I catch myself slipping, I'm like, nope, get up, get back up, and get going. Something happens. And after I've done that enough times, bad things just stop happening. But if I look back and I realize it's not always that they just stopped happening, sometimes it's that they happen and they don't bother me. Like in the old days, wake up in the morning, first thing you do is spill your coffee all over your clothes. That's the kind of thing that could ruin a person's day if they're, if they don't think it through and say, I'm not going to let this ruin my day. And all this starts to sound like some kind of motivational speech bullshit, but you know what? They're right. A lot of these guys who talk about this stuff are right, but they put it in a format like you should be happy and you can be happy now, And you can't always just be happy now because somebody tells you to be happy. That's something you have to work out on your own. So I guess each person's going to find it in their own way. And I hope, anyway. That's what I'd like to see. More people happy. The more people around me that I see happy, the more that I know that they're not so worried about what other people think or believe or do, but rather are just concerned with living and getting along with other people and knowing people. You can't run away from society, nor can you try to dominate it. You have to integrate within it, and that's what integrity is. So, I wish you all the best of evenings, and take care.